week, I started a series of talks about spiritual practices that help us to remember who we are and how the laws of the universe work. And as I started the series, I had the idea that we were talking about how to be in the flow of God's good. And as I've worked through it, I realized it's not how to be in the flow. It's to remember that we are the flow. We are the flow of God's great good. It's a big difference to be the flow versus being in the flow. And I started out saying there were going to be 7 practices. Well, there's going to be 8. And I'm doing a CD of affirmations, and I said last week that if you came to 5 of the 7 weeks, you'd get that CD. And so now I'm saying that if you sign that little clipboard and you're here 5 of the 8 weeks, you'll get that CD of affirmations. See, there's bribery. And these 8 practices, when practiced consistently and simultaneously, they put us in remembrance and in harmony with spiritual law, which moves us into a place of living as the flow of God's good. And what I have seen is that sometimes we pick and choose and pick one practice over another practice. And so we do some of the practices, and some of us do some of the practices some of the time. And we wonder why we don't feel like that we are God's flow. And I'm just suggesting that we practice all 8 of these practices. Now, last week I talked about the hard one. The hard one was spiritual giving to the place where you're spiritually fed. And we had a visual demonstration. We had 2 tables up here, and people brought 10 things, and they put 1 on this table and 9 on the other table. And it was real clear when we got through that the table with the 9 was heaped up and running over, and the table with the 1 was not very much stuff. But what happens is you and I start thinking about how big that 1 is, and we forget how big the 90 is. So that was our 10% versus 90%. And so today, our second practice is to be about our divine purpose. Now, there are a lot of people in this world who would have us believe that our purpose is to be on this planet to struggle and to work hard and to pay taxes and retire and then die and maybe go to heaven. That's not our divine purpose. Can you tell me some places where you hear that? Anybody's parents tell them that's what they needed to do? Anytime you watch television, do they not say, what do they say? Buy this, buy that. And so what do you have to do to buy this and to buy that? Work hard. So we've got a lot of people trying to tell us what our life should be like. But you and I know, if you're here, I know that you know someplace inside that there is a divine purpose. And each of us are here to discover and demonstrate our divinity. Edwin Books, in her book, The 4 Spiritual Laws of Prosperity, says that our mission on this earth is to find out what we need to do to prove to ourselves, not the rest of the world, what we need to do to prove to ourselves that we are divine. And Deepak Chopra says, discover your divinity, find your unique talent, serve humanity with it, and you will begin to experience your life as a miraculous expression of divinity, not just occasionally, but all the time. And you will know true joy and the true meaning of success, the ecstasy and the exaltation of your spirit. That's living as God's good, as the flow of God's good. So on one level, you and I are all here to do one thing, and that's to discover our divinity. And on another level, you and I, each one have a unique purpose. And that unique purpose is that for us to find our special gift, our talent, the way that we want to impact the world so that it becomes a better place for everyone. I love Florence Scovel Shinn. She was one of the mothers of New Thought. And she said there is a place that you are to fill, and no one else can fill it. There is something that you are to do that no one else can do. So the first level of purpose is common, find our divinity. The second level is to find our unique way of demonstrating or expressing it. There are two ways we can know if we're doing that purpose that is ours to do. One is, are we serving mankind, humankind? Are we serving others? Albert Schweitzer said, I don't know what your destiny will be, but this one thing I know, the only ones of you who will be truly happy are those of you who have sought and found how to serve. The second thing about our purpose is it's got to bring us joy. It's got to be fun. If what you're doing is not bringing you joy, then you're not on purpose. Now, I'm going to tell you, that does not mean you don't have a bad day. But it means overall, you have a purpose. And you live on that purpose. This church has a purpose. Does anybody know what our purpose is? A radiant center of light, life, and love. Pretty good. Pretty good. I like that. What else? Create a world that works for all. I like that. Be a positive path for spiritual living. I like that. Be together. Be peace. We have a mission. We're an inclusive community consciously growing spiritually and expressing God in thought, word, and action. I've had trouble remembering that. And you'll notice that each week up here on the top of your little flyer, it says, knowing God and being God. Because I think that's what that consciously growing spiritually and expressing God in thought, word, and action, I think that's what it is. Knowing God and being God. Those are those same words that we just heard that we're supposed to do, that we were supposed to discover and demonstrate. Now, I'm going to tell you a couple of things about that second level of purpose. I'm going to tell you some things that your divine purpose is not. Your divine purpose is not something that turns on like a light bulb, generally speaking. You're not going to reach 18, 21, 45 and automatically know this, your divine purpose. I had to go through a number of career changes before I realized my divine purpose. So I don't know what your divine purpose is, but I would say that you probably didn't come out of high school knowing what it was. Now, our musicians, maybe, with that wonderful talent, they knew that. The second thing about your divine purpose is it may not be what you're doing for a living. Sometimes our divine purpose is what we do on the weekends or completely separate from our paying job. And that's okay. It's fine. It doesn't matter when you're doing it as long as you're doing it. And knowing that, I believe that the universe still works to bring purpose and prosperity together for each of us. The third thing I want to say about our purpose is it's not too late to begin. So maybe you've had a purpose, and that purpose is no longer your purpose. It's no longer valid, or you've completed that purpose. No matter how old we are, we can always have a new purpose. In Jonathan Livingston Seagull, Richard Bach, the author, said, "It's good to be a seeker." And I believe, yes, it is good to be a seeker, but sooner or later, you and I have to become finders. We have to quit seeking out of every book, every new speaker, and we have to go inside and find our core truth. And it's never out there, it's always in here. Yesterday, or the day before, I was going down O'Galley, and the church that is right off O'Galley had a sign. And I think, you know how when you drive by and you think you see a sign, you think you know what it said? It may not say it, but this is what I got out of it. This is what God had me see. It says, maybe God is waiting for a sign from you. How many times have we asked God for a sign about our purpose? Well, maybe God is waiting for us to go inside, figure out what it is we want to do so that God can join us on the path. There is such power in purpose. I'm going to tell you a story, and I have told you this story before. Every time I read this story, I am filled with a little bit of awe, and I'm always kind of touched. The first time or two I read it, I got tears. This story is about a young African whose name was Legson Kayira. And Legson, in October of 1958, was 16 or 17 years old. His parents didn't know how old he was. He began the journey of his life. He had been taught by missionaries, and he had read books. And he read a book about Abraham Lincoln, and he read a book about George Washington Carver and Booker T. Washington. And he wanted to make a difference in the world like they did. And so he decided that the only way he could do that is if he got an education. And here he is on the east coast of Africa. And he starts out on the journey to walk to Cairo, which is about 3,000 miles. He started out with a 5-day supply of food, his Bible, the book Pilgrim's Progress, a small axe for protection, and a blanket. After 5 days, he had only covered 25 miles. And he'd run out of food. And he was at that point. Do I carry on with my purpose, or do I turn back? What do I do? And he thought about it, and he prayed about it. And he came to the decision that he would not stop until he reached America, or that he would die trying. And so sometimes he walked with strangers, and sometimes he walked alone. Sometimes he would stop in villages and do work. Sometimes he would have food. Sometimes he'd have to forage for berries and wild fruits. At one point, a fever struck him, and he was gravely ill, and strangers took him in and nursed him. He went through hundreds of villages where over 50 different languages that he didn't know were spoken. In January of 1960, 15 months after he had started out, he reached Kampala, the capital of Uganda, which was 1,000 miles. And he stopped to work. And he would work and he would go to the library. And as he was in the library, he was looking up colleges in the United States. And he came across this college that had a picture that looked very much like his homeland. It had some mountains, it had blue sky, it was just beautiful. It was Skagit Valley College in Mount Vernon, Washington. And so he decided, that's where I want to go to school. And so he wrote a letter and he told them his situation. And the dean wrote him back and said, if you can get here, we'll give you a scholarship, room and board, and a job. Pretty good, huh? But he needed a couple of things. He needed a passport and he needed a visa. To get a passport, you have to have some sort of registered birth documents. And his parents did not know when he was born. But missionaries helped him. The missionaries that had worked, that were there in Africa, the ones that had worked with him, made a guesstimate. They wrote letters, and finally he got a passport. But he didn't have a visa. But he had some money saved up, and he started on toward Cairo. By the time he reached Khartoum, he was penniless and exhausted. But word of his journey had spread. It had spread throughout the college and in the town of Mount Vernon, Washington, and they had raised $650 to send him for his round-trip airfare. In December of 1960, 2 years, more than 2 years, because he started in October of 58. In December of 1960, he finally arrived at college with his 2 books. He continued his academic journey. He became a professor of political science at Cambridge University. He's a very well-respected author. He had a purpose. He stepped out on that with that purpose and kept going. And don't you know that time when he was sitting there playing, should I turn around and go back? Or shall I keep going? And when he made that decision, I'm going or I'm going to die, don't you know that that was the sign the universe needed? That he was committed. And when we step out in commitment, we know that the universe lines up to help us. Jesus knew his purpose. He knew his purpose very early. When he was 12 years old, his parents had taken him to Jerusalem to celebrate Passover. And while they celebrated Passover and they left, and while they were on the journey home, about 3 days out, they realized they couldn't find their son. And so they had to turn around and they went back looking for him. And finally they found him in the temple discussing spiritual matters with the elders. And his parents admonished him, and Jesus said to them, do you not know that I must be about my Father's business? Do you not know? I must be about my Father's business. He knew his purpose. He lived his life out of that purpose. Consequently, the account of his life is extraordinary. He became aware of the presence of God within him. And then he set out to tell that, share that, teach that with every person he knew. So you and I get the opportunity to discover our own divine purpose. When you came in this morning, you got a handout. And because we're running late, I'm not going over the handout with you. It's take home. I will say that the first step in finding your purpose is to pray, to sit down and be still. When Jesus' parents found him, he was in the temple with his elders. Metaphysically, he was in quiet reflection with a greater wisdom. And that's what you and I are called to be still and know. An affirmation that you might use is, my life has purpose. I give my gift to the world. My life has purpose. I give my gift to the world. I don't know that that's on your handout. You might want to write that down. My life has purpose. I give my gift to the world. If you sit in meditation and you go into meditation with that thought, my life has purpose. I give my gift to the world. You'll get there. And after you've spent some time in meditation and you're quiet, there's some questions you can ask yourself. Like, what's happening where you experience fun? What are you doing when you feel God's pleasure? What are you doing when you lose all sense of time? I'm up here on Sunday speaking. What do you do? What excites you to share with the world? And then there's time to look at, what are all my dreams? And this is your dreams, not your family's dreams, not somebody else's dreams. What are your personal dreams? And then to write a purpose statement. And there's a little formula there and you have some examples. And so I hope that those of you who don't feel like you've got a purpose, or maybe you've had a purpose and you've lost your purpose, you've kind of forgotten it, or maybe you never stopped in your life to verbalize your purpose, I'd invite you to do that. Maya Angelou wrote, if one is lucky, a solitary fantasy can totally transform 1 million realities. I don't know whose purpose in this room is going to transform 1 million realities, but we can be sure that someone's purpose in this room is that significant. Comes to my mind, think about the person who wrote the peace song. That song, has that not changed 1 million realities? I know the truth, and the truth is that when we're on our purpose, when we're doing what's our purpose, we are aligning ourselves to be the flow of God's good. And I think that church sign was pretty cute. I think maybe God is waiting for a sign from us that we are ready to be on purpose. Have a great week.